Hi friends, and welcome to what we like to call the greatest summer vegetable garden video ever. We call it that partly in jest, but partly because we hope to convey concepts that are far greater than just one vegetable garden alone could convey. This is really the story about our health and our environment and how we treat all living things. Our version of that story measures 40 feet by 40 feet, and we call this happy place Rancho Reiso. I like to tell people how big our garden is because it's similar in size to many people's front and backyards where I feel they have the opportunity to grow food instead of lawns. In addition to growing vegetables, our two African pygmy goats, Alice and Charlotte, live back here, and 4 hens whom I'll introduce you to later. Our animals, combined with all the seen and unseen critters that travel through or live in this space, add to the collective soul. When we pay attention to the subtle melodies of the garden song, it teaches us that everything is connected. We cover a lot of ground in the summer garden video, pun intended, so we've broken it up into small segments, which you can watch piece by piece. But we recommend you get comfortable, pop some organic popcorn or cut up some heirloom veggies, and watch it straight through. Enjoy. Let's start not in my backyard, but welcome to my neighbor's kitchen garden. Earlier in the summer, they traveled internationally for a few weeks and asked me to take care of their garden while they were gone. Here's a pro tip for you. When your neighbors go out of town and their garden's booming and ask you to harvest, the answer is yes, please. When the neighbors first moved in, they looked at my garden and the wife jokingly said I was going to have some friendly gardening competition. But I proposed it's more likely we're going to have a cooperative going on here, and that's how things turned out. When their tomatoes are booming but mine aren't, we trade. And likewise, when my lettuces are going off but theirs are getting too much sun, I give them some. Since the day we moved into our house, I had always admired this little red barn and this nice big pasture. So when they set up their garden space and I saw how much sunlight and square footage they had enclosed, I couldn't help but be a tad jealous. But after a couple of weeks and a couple of wheelbarrows full of apples and plums and baskets of vegetables, I realized I have my own space to care for. With all the apples that I harvested from their tree, I made applesauce, and the only other ingredients I added were a little bit of organic sugar and lemon. In a few of the jars I added some plums. I kept some of the jars for myself, and of course I gave some to my neighbors in gratitude for them letting me have some of their abundant harvest. Before moving on and sharing with you what we've done in our vegetable garden this summer, I want to show you one other special place. It's a place where I'm not only learning how to grow healthy food in a responsible manner, but it's also a place where I'm learning how to be a humble servant to the land. I continue to volunteer once a week at a farm in Malibu, curated by this lady, Carrie Clasby. Carrie goes by the moniker the Intuitive Forager, and she buys from organic farms around Southern California, supplying the produce to some of the finest hotels and restaurants in the area. Here you see her orchestrating her crew, who is loading up refrigerated trucks, preparing to go out on deliveries. Carrie pays the bills on this farm, and at the end of the day, she's the boss. In Star Wars terms, she's the Princess Leia of this farm, in charge of this band of rebels fighting against the evil empire of conventionally grown big agricultural foods. And this is Dave, the Han Solo of this farm. Dave is an agricultural consultant that manages hundreds of acres in the area, some conventional and some organic farms.
Wow!
Here he's demonstrating his blaster techniques, a non-lethal way of scaring crows away from your fields.
Yep, crow control.
Dave is a get-things-done kind of guy, but does not believe in the Force, which is a stark contrast to this gentleman. Meet Farmer Jack, a biodynamic expert of decades, and much like Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda, this man is very learned in the ways of the Force. Jack is generous with both his time and knowledge, and I in turn want to share something he taught me with you. Too good to be kept a secret is Ehrenfried Pheiffers' Biodynamic Compost Starter. Over the past 40 years, Jack has become recognized as one of the finest biodynamic compost makers. Jack has farmed with and mentored under the likes of Harris Porter, Alan Chadwick, and some of the other well-known names of the biodynamic community. Here, Jack is dumping some of the scraps or vegetables that didn't make the cut from Carrie's intuitive foraging operation. He'll cover that vegetation with manure, keep it at a proper moisture level, add some of Dr. Pheiffers' compost starter, and in a few months it will be returned to the field. But let's take a moment and listen to Jack himself as he teaches us how to use the compost starter on our fields.
We mix it 12 hours. It comes in a powder form, and we mix it 12 hours before we're going to use it. Pray tell, why do we mix it 12 hours before?
Jack, why do we mix it 12 hours before we use it?
Because it's a dry bacteria, and it grows into multi-billion microorganisms. 1 ounce. So we have here the most magnificent tool I have ever come across for agriculture. It's called the toilet brush.
What a beauty.
Right. It costs $1.99 store, and it has a spray on it dipped into the compost starter, sprayed. One flick has probably 1 million bacteria on it. So I put it on everything. It invigorates everything.
With the sounds of sirens in the background, Jack wields that toilet brush like a Jedi Knight would wield a lightsaber, or like a magician would wield his magic wand.
Go 6 or 8 feet. Do it again. Put the magic on again.
And so I take this and other lessons Jack has taught me back to my garden. Among the crops grown at the Malibu farm this summer, I was especially attached to the giant sunflowers. And that's because the seeds for these flowers came from sunflowers we grew in our garden the previous year, and we had given away hundreds of other starts to friends and acquaintances to encourage gardening. We had called this giveaway Sunflower Project 2017, but the Malibu farm was definitely the piece de la resistance of the project. The sunflowers caught the eyes of thousands of passerbys on Pacific Coast Highway that summer. But the flowers also caught the fancy of the wild parrots of Malibu. And even though these birds got all the seeds, we felt good at the farm about this planting and the way it helped out these locals. As a regular volunteer, I had the pleasure of helping out other people who would come to volunteer for 1 or 2 visits. On this particular day, I worked with a really kind family picking strawberries. Carrie had met them at a farmer's market where they sell coconut products, and I now regularly buy from them. Our largest planting at the farm over summer was tomatoes, and here Dave shows me some techniques for harvesting. I had spent many days on that farm harvesting tomatoes, and it really is hard work. We occasionally had volunteers who helped with this harvest, but the reality is most of it was picked by Dave's crew, 4 very hard-working immigrants. And this, my friend, is an important point I wanted to stress. The reality is that most of the food that's picked is done by immigrants. And the politics of this summer had a strong anti-immigrant overtone. We're all connected, and without these hardworking people, food would be more expensive, because immigrants really do feed America. I use the term biodynamic frequently in this video, and you may be wondering what that means. And an oversimplified explanation might be to call it morganic, because organics simply concern themselves about what we don't put on the soil, things like pesticides, herbicides, and chemical-based fertilizers. But biodynamics is about more than what we don't do to the soil. Instead, it focuses on improving the soil health and nutritive quality of food. The Malibu farm that I volunteer at can measure its distance to the ocean not by miles, but in feet. The same ocean where my family and I play and swim and surf. And because chemicals from agriculture are some of the biggest polluters of water in the world, I'm acutely aware of the problem. The connection is right in front of my face and undeniable. Beneath every farm there's groundwater. Throughout this state, many cities have had their groundwater polluted to the point that people can't drink from their taps. And it happens across the country and the world. And water is the ingredient of life worth protecting. After learning about Dr. Pheiffers Biodynamic Compost Starter from Jack, I ordered some from the Josephine Porter Institute. As instructed, I mixed up a batch 12 hours prior to use with rainwater that I have collected in rain barrels. The compost starter is made of carefully cultivated strains of soil bacteria, enzymes, fungi, as well as biodynamic preparations 500 through 507. When used properly, it will help quickly break down raw organic matter and reassemble it into more simple, long-lasting compounds which turn the soil to humus. It fixes nitrogen from the air, making it available for plants, increasing the availability of minerals. So now I use it on my compost, and as Jack showed me, I also use it as a field spray, spreading it throughout my garden. And at some point I'll probably also buy myself a good toilet brush. Some of the crops we planted in summer were ready the same season, but others don't mature until fall. These ears of corn are a variety I call the Rancho Reiso Red. It's a hybrid that I crossed several seasons ago and have been picking the best ears to stabilize the variety. I tend to grow heirloom crops, but when two heirlooms cross-pollinate in our garden and give me something unique, well, those are seeds I especially enjoy saving to grow out in following years. For this variety of corn, I'll remove kernels from two different ears to make sure I get some genetic diversity. We'll typically put a couple of kernels in every cell of our starter pots, and the soil that I typically use is a combination of biodynamic compost and organic seed starter mix. Once the kernels are in the cells, I'll give them a gentle press to push them down below the soil surface. The other variety of corn that we're growing this year is called Glass Gem. It's a gorgeous corn with multicolored kernels, and the seeds we're using are from ears that we also grew out last year. With all the kernels in place, we put a light covering of compost on top. For new seedlings, I like to use rainwater for their first few waterings. We have some rain barrels at the downspouts of our house. Rainwater doesn't have chlorine or fluoride or other chemicals that are often added to our tap water, and it does contain trace minerals. Corn sprouts fairly quickly, and on the propagation table here you can also see the pole beans behind the corn. Watch how those pole bean leaves react to the changing sunlight, and it gives you a sense that these plants are sentient and aware of their environment. In this part of the garden during spring, I grew several kinds of beets and several different kinds of radishes. Here I'm doing a final harvest in that familiar garden dance of out with the old and in with the new. It's on this plot of land that I'm going to be planting the corn, pole beans, and squash, and I prepare the ground with one of my favorite garden tools, the broad fork. The blades or tines on this broad fork go down deep into the soil, and as I pull back it lifts up, allowing for air and water penetration without being as disruptive as a tiller is, which can destroy soil structure and kill earthworms. I laid down some drip irrigation lines, and at each dripper I plant one corn and one pole bean. We have several rows that form this block, and I'll alternate one row with glass gem corn, one row with Rancho Reiso corn. I'll also alternate the beans that I'm planting with the hope that I get cross-pollination amongst the different varieties. In a couple of spots along this block, I'll plant squash, including delicata, butternut, and pumpkin. The planting of these three crops together, squash, corn, and beans, is called a Three Sisters garden. For thousands of years, Native Americans used this particular combination of companion planting because the crops help each other survive. The beans climb up the corn stalks like a trellis, holding them together in strong winds, and beans put nitrogen into the soil, corn being a heavy feeder of nitrogen, and the squash acts as a mulch, keeping weeds down and moisture in the ground. Here's our Three Sisters garden just a couple of months later, and I'm going to retrieve that paper bag which I've left on some of the opening up corn tassels which are just starting to release pollen. Corn typically pollinates by wind, but in this case I'm going to give it a little bit of human assistance. Corn has both male and female reproduction parts on a single plant. The tassels and the flowers that grow on those tassels and the pollen that emerge from those flowers represent the male portions of the plant. Here I carefully separate the flower bits from the yellow pollen. I'll pour that collected pollen into a Dixie cup, and I'm going to use a brush and brush it onto the silks of the corn. The ears and the silks represent the female portion of the corn, and each piece of pollen, attaching to each silk, travels down and encourages one kernel to grow. I call this process corn porn, and it ensures my ears are full of kernels. But you'll also notice the pole beans that have wrapped up the corn stalks as part of the Three Sisters planting. We all know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, but here's the story of Jack and the Biodynamic lettuce patch. This blend of about a dozen varieties of lettuce seed were given to me by Jack at the Malibu farm. With the seeds, he also gave me a bag of his biodynamic compost and instructed me to lay the compost in a space about the size of a picnic table, maybe 2.5 feet by 5 feet. After casting the seed down onto the compost, Jack advised me to lightly cover those seeds with another thin layer of his compost. I marked that space with a stake, indicating it was Biodynamic Jack's lettuce patch. Further down that same row, I laid down some store-bought biodynamic compost. And on this patch I cast down a variety of heirloom lettuce seeds that my neighbors bought me while they were in France, in gratitude for me taking care of their garden while they were on vacation. On the row behind me, I planted a variety of radish and carrot seeds, and between these two rows I should have some wonderful salads throughout the fall. Planting seeds is a beautiful meditation, and it reminds me of the lyrics of a garden song, where inch by inch and row by row, that's how we make our garden grow. Our Rancho Reiso summer garden harvests this year were in many ways defined by peppers. Of our approximately 80 pepper plants, it was the sweet peppers that started producing first. We saved seeds from the best fully ripened vegetables. This year's bumper crop required that I hammer stakes into the ground and then tie the pepper plants up to support the weight of all the vegetables that were growing. By midsummer, the mid-heat range peppers were starting to produce, those peppers in maybe 2 to 40,000 Scoville range. But by late summer, the scorchers were starting to produce, including some peppers that range over 1,000,000 Scoville. Sweet peppers we just pick off the plant and eat daily, but the crazy hot peppers are too much to pop in your mouth, so this year we made hot sauce. As I cut the peppers and put them in the bullet, I save seeds from the best pods. In each batch, I add a couple of cloves of our homegrown garlic, as well as some quality sea salt and organic apple cider vinegar. We blend it until it's liquefied, and if it's too thick, you can just add some more apple cider vinegar. But careful when opening up the bullet, because the fumes are intense. You'll notice that we do the entire preparation outside, because even the steam coming out the saucepan left my face and skin burning. We'll cook the sauce until it boils rapidly, and then we pour it into sterilized jars. In this case, little 50 milliliter sample alcohol sized jars, so we can give them away as gifts in our holiday packages. And the truth is, the heat's so intense, just a few drops go a long way. But the summer wasn't just about peppers. Here in the foreground I have some Vana and Krishna Tulsi, and in the background is eggplant. And oh look, here comes the ground squirrel that ate most of my eggplants. This summer we had a number of zucchini and squash. Keep your eye on the brick here. What I like about this segment is that first a little lizard shows up, and then a larger one shows up to sun himself. And it reminds me that the garden is home to lots of critters that live in harmony and balance with one another. On our Clemson and Burgundy okra plants, a unique insect relationship demonstrates that balance. Here, an army of ants dominate over aphids to steal the sap they extract from the plants. We try and be seed savers for all of our best crops for a variety of reasons. Not only does it save you money, but the crops become adapted to your weather conditions and soil types, making them more hardy from one season to the next. When some of our spring radishes went to pod, we enjoyed many of them fresh. They have a texture of a sugar snap pea with a little bit of zing, and of course we let some dry. So I'm going to crush open the pods and collect the seeds for future crops. I use a rubber mallet to crush open the pods, and the seeds, as well as some bits of shell, fall through the small holes of the strainer. Seeds are typically heavier than the shells or chaff, so we use a technique called winnowing to separate them. A light breeze or gentle blowing are usually enough to separate the seeds and chaff, and we use this technique not only for radish, but other seeds like carrot and sunflower. This past spring we got 4 baby chicks, and they grew up very fast. An adolescent hen is called a pullet, and it was in mid-August that we got our first egg. Our family was actually on vacation in Hawaii when that first egg came, and our pet sitter sent us this picture. Based on that blue color, we knew it came from Martha, our Americana. Shortly thereafter, all the girls started laying, and now we're getting a couple of eggs almost every day. In addition to organic chicken feed crumble, we also give our girls lots of scraps from the kitchen. The fact that they have a diverse diet, that they have a clean environment, and that they receive plenty of affection ensures that we get high quality, nutrient-dense eggs. We'll frequently take the bedding off the floor of their enclosure and add it to our compost pile, that chicken manure being a valuable resource that ends up back in our garden. The garden in turn gives us vegetables. Some of those vegetables end up back with the girls, and it's a cycle. Before we wrap up this summer video, I wanted to take you to one more sacred place. My family and I have been fortunate enough to be frequent visitors to the Hawaiian Islands. This spot in particular is Waimea Bay on the north shore of Oahu. For good reason, Hawaiians are fiercely protective of their land, and they teach their children a concept called Malama Honua, which means to take care of and protect everything that makes up our world, the land, the ocean, and the people. When visiting the islands, instead of a grocery store, we shop at farmers markets, where we can buy fresh, tropical fruit directly from the farmers instead of imported fruits from thousands of miles away. But back home, you can do the same thing by shopping at a farmer's market. I encourage you to get to know the people, the places, and the processes by which your food is grown. Try new and unusual fruits and vegetables, and of course make sure they're grown in a responsible manner by talking to the farmers. Back home in our garden, we listen carefully to what the land, the critters, and the plants are trying to tell us. All of us must act as soldiers in the battle for healthy foods, soils, air, and water. Don't be fooled by the dark forces and the perceived path of least resistance. Your actions matter. Even the largest companies and most powerful politicians pay attention to how you spend your money on food. Live like the Star Wars Jedi Knight, one with the Force that binds all living things throughout the universe, from the furthest star, connected to the deepest earthworm, connected to you. We are all one. And on that note, my friend, I wish you health, happiness, and a long life. Thanks for watching my video. Be well and take care.